Well, let's take a minute to pray. Jesus, you are Messiah, Emmanuel, Lord of all. We've proclaimed you as that. We've worshiped you as that because you are all of that. So, Lord of all, Emmanuel, Messiah, the great I am, the good shepherd, the one who is all. We worship you. And we want to hear from you. We want to know you more deeply because we want to serve you. We want to obey you. We want your kingdom to be built. We want to be disciples who are making disciples. We want what you want. Your heart is for the salvation of all people. So Jesus, we thank you for our salvation. We thank you for your heart that brought us to you. And we ask that you would use us, that we might be bringing others to salvation as well. So God, let us know you more deeply today. I ask this and I pray it in your name, Jesus. Amen. Well, our story today is found in Genesis chapter 37 through Genesis 50. There's a lot of words. You can follow along if you want to. Genesis 37 through Genesis 50. At least take time to read through it after. The character that we're going to hear from today really lived a full life. His life was an amazing life. It was a full life. It was a life like our life, full of ups and downs and sideways. You know, it was a life not unlike ours that, life is surprising. Life doesn't go the way we expect it to go, the way we plan it to go, the way we think it should go, not even sometimes the way we pray it will go. Life can be confusing. And we can find ourselves saying, why is this happening? What's going on here? I didn't see this coming. I don't know what to do. I mean, it's confusing. And one of the strange things about life for Christians is that not only can life still be confusing for us, but God can be confusing. Sometimes I find myself saying, as I'm sure you have and will, that you say, why is this happening, God? How is it that this is going on in my life? God, where are you in this? God, where are you when I need you now? And that's perhaps one of the hardest things in life is the confusion we have about God. Expecting God to work certain ways, but he doesn't. Thinking God will do certain things, but he does different things. Thinking that, look, we're disciples of Christ. We're dearly loved children. We are adopted as his sons and daughters. We are special to him. We are the sheep of his pasture. We are a holy people. We are those who receive him, who follow him, who want to obey him. We are disciples of Christ. So shouldn't life go better? Shouldn't God do more for us? Shouldn't our life be a little less unexpected? But it's not. And we wonder, where is God in this? Where are you now, God? And so really the question for today is, what do we do when we're confused about God? What do we do when we're confused about God? What do we do when God doesn't make sense? What do we do when we don't see God, when we don't sense God, when we say to ourselves, God, where are you now? What do we do? Well, perhaps this Bible character can answer that question for us. Hello, my name is Joseph. I'm the 11th son of 12 sons. And I'll just get it out there right now to tell you, I'm my father's favorite. I am the favorite son. Everybody knows I'm the favorite son. My brothers know I'm the favorite son. My mother knows that. My cousins, relatives, everybody knows that I'm the favorite son. And I know that I'm the favorite son. And I let my brothers know that I'm the favorite son. It's pretty evident all my life that I've been the favorite son. When I was 17, my father made an ornate robe for me. It was a robe unlike any other robe that anybody has ever worn. It wasn't a normal robe that most people wear. It was an ornate robe of different colors, of different style, of different textures. I mean, it was a robe of robes. It screamed you're special, your favorite. Whenever I wore it, I knew that I was the favorite son. Whenever I wore it, my brothers knew I was the favorite son. And I got to tell you, they hated me for it. They hated me for it. They didn't have a kind word to say about me or to me, for that matter. I suppose it didn't help when I repeated a couple of dreams that I had. I had these dreams from God, and I knew they were from God. And I had these dreams, and in one dream, my brothers and I were out in the field, and we were binding sheaves together. And my sheaf rose and stood up, and the other sheaves of my brothers bowed down before mine. I told my brothers that dream, and they hated me even more. The second dream I had was something similar, except in my dream, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me. That was pretty clear. It was my mother and my father and my 11 brothers would bow down to me. I told them that dream, and I told them what happened in the dream, and they hated me even more, if that was even possible. And you know, even my dad wasn't very happy with that dream. So I really didn't do a whole lot to help my situation. I was arrogant, I was proud, I was a jerk. And I knew my brothers hated me, and they wanted to kill me. I knew that. Well, they would always go out with the sheep. I didn't go out with the sheep. I didn't have to because I was, special. I was the favorite. I was 17. I should have been out there, but I didn't have to. They were out in Shechem, a ways away from where we lived, and they were finding pasture for the sheep. And my father said to me, Joseph, I want you to go and check on your brothers. Tell me how things are. Tell me what's going on. That was a bit of a point of contention because my brothers knew that I was just going there to tattle on them. I would go there and I'd tell my dad what I saw and what I thought was wrong and what I thought they could do different and better. And, that didn't go well. I went to Shechem. I didn't want to. I hated going to check on my brothers. I wish my dad wouldn't ask me to do that, but I was obedient and I said, I will go do that. So I went to Shechem, and they weren't in Shechem. I don't know. I asked around. I said, have you seen my brothers? Now, most people knew who they were. They knew me, especially when I wore my robe. They knew who I was, and they knew who my brothers were. And they told me they had gone over to Dothan. So I started making my journey to Dothan. Kind of strange that they went to Dothan, but I went to Dothan. Before I got to Dothan, a long way off, my brothers recognized me. It was hard to miss me in my robe. It kind of, yelled, hello, I'm coming. It wasn't something that you blended in with anybody. They could see me from miles away, and they knew I was coming, and they were planning to kill me. I think they would have killed me. I know they would have killed me if it weren't for my brother Reuben. Reuben was the oldest of us all. And when I got there, they tore my robe off of me, and they manhandled me for a bit, and they threw me in a cistern. The cistern was empty. It wasn't wet anymore. It was moist, I suppose, but at least I didn't have to tread water. But they threw me into a cistern. And they argued a while, and they talked a while, and many of my brothers wanted to kill me, but Reuben convinced them not to kill me. And I thought, God, what's going on? And God, how can I be down in this cistern? How could you send me to Dothan? How could I be my favorite son of my father? How could you make these promises to me? And here I am in the bottom of a well. And my brothers want to kill me. And they aren't going to actively kill me, but they've decided to leave me in this well and let nature run its course. They were going to take my robe back to my father. They were going to dip it in the blood of a sheep, a ram, whatever, and they were going to say, see, look, he got torn apart by wild beasts. But they weren't bringing me home. They didn't want me to live. They might not use a knife to kill me, but they were going to use the cistern and the elements to kill me. And I thought, how does that make sense? God, where are you now? God, how are you going to show up now? A little while went by, and there was some commotion going on. I couldn't see it. I couldn't hear it very well. I was in a cistern. It wasn't 4 feet deep. It was more like 12 or 15 or 20 feet deep. And so I didn't know what was going on. The next thing I knew, I was being hauled up. And I thought, okay, this is good. I'm getting hauled out of this well. I won't die here. And it was come to find out, it was a traveling caravan of Ishmaelites. And these Ishmaelites, they were on their way to Egypt. And my brothers sold me. They sold me as a slave. They told the Ishmaelites that I was their slave and I was in the cistern because I was a disobedient, bad slave, and they sold me to the Ishmaelites. How does that make sense? I, Joseph, the favorite father of my son, the one who had the dreams from God, the one who knows God, how am I being sold as a slave to the Ishmaelites? I would never see home again. I would never see my father or my mother again. I wouldn't see my brothers. They sold me as a slave. The lowest of the low. I had no position. I had no power. I had no influence. I was no longer special. I was a nobody. I was worth only what somebody would pay for me. They mistreated me. They put me in chains. They brought me into this marketplace in Egypt. And there in this market, there was a whole bunch of us slaves, and they brought us up, and people surrounded, and they were bidding on us. I thought, God, where are you now? God, how can I be in this predicament now? God, I serve you. I try to do what is right. I know you. I have a relationship with you. You're my God. I'm your servant. How can you do this to me? Where is God now in this? I was bought at the marketplace by someone from the household of one of Pharaoh's entourage, I guess you could say. It was Potiphar was his name. Potiphar was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh. He was an important person. He was an influential person. He was the captain of the guard. I mean, he took care of Pharaoh and made sure Pharaoh was safe. So he was an important person. I was taken to his house, and I became one of the servants. I began to do my work, and I did it well, I have to tell you that. And everything that I did, God prospered it. So when I was given a job to do, I did it very well, and it worked out excellently. And so I was given more responsibility. And every responsibility that I was given, I did so well, and God prospered it so well that they gave me more and more. And eventually, I ended up being the head of Potiphar's house. There was no one greater than me in Potiphar's house, well, except for Potiphar himself. I was in charge of all the servants. I was in charge of all the investments. I was in charge of all the crops. I was in charge of all the animals. I was in charge of how that household ran. I was the one who did all that. And I knew that God was in this. And I knew that God was with me. And I knew that God was here now. God showed up for me. And things were growing great. Except for Potiphar's wife. Now, Potiphar's wife liked me. No, she liked me. Like, I admit I'm a handsome guy. And I'm a pretty good-looking guy. But Potiphar's wife liked me. I mean, she really liked me. Potiphar's wife constantly tried to get me in bed with her. Constantly. All the servants knew that. All the household knew that. It wasn't a mystery. Everybody could see that happening. And she was just unabashed about it. And then one day there was nobody around. The servants, I don't know where they were, but nobody else was around. And she grabbed hold of me. And she grabbed my robe. It wasn't the same robe that my father made, but she grabbed the robe that I was in. And she wanted to drag me off to her bedroom. Well, I got out of that robe. I slipped out of that robe and I ran. I ran out of that house as far as I could and as long as I could. But I knew I had to come back. I had nowhere else to go. I would be a runaway slave, a runaway servant, and that was the punishment of death. So I had to come back, and I came back. And when I came back, Potiphar's wife made up a story. Potiphar's wife told Potiphar that I tried to rape her. It wasn't true. Everybody knew that wasn't true. The servants knew it wasn't true. The household knew it wasn't true. Everybody who knew what was going on, they knew who she was and they knew who I was. And they knew the real story, but nobody stood up for me. Nobody said the truth. And Potiphar believed his wife. And he was angry with me. He was so angry with me that he threw me into prison. And I said, God, how does this make sense? God, how is it that you took me out of a cistern and you brought me to Egypt and you made me a slave and you took me out of that and I'm the highest person in Potiphar's household. I had influence, I had power, I had position, I was doing well. How does it make sense that now I'm in jail for doing nothing wrong? I was innocent. I was serving God. I kept my relationship with God. I was doing everything that God wanted me to do. I said no to Potiphar's wife time and time again because I knew it was against your will, God, and I did that time and time again. I could have easily said sure and I would have been fine. But I wanted to serve God. I wanted to obey God. I wanted to do what was right before God. And here I am in prison. That doesn't make sense. How is it that when I do what is right before God, I end up in this place? Where is God now? I don't know. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. Well, I wasn't in any ordinary prison. I was in Pharaoh's prison. It was the prison that was reserved for Pharaoh's servants and Pharaoh's household and Pharaoh's entourage. When he was displeased with any one of them, he would send them to that prison. And it could be your life was taken or it could be your life was restored. Nobody really knew, but you were in Pharaoh's prison and you were kind of at his whim. Your life depended on what he felt like that day. And there I was in that prison. For something I didn't do, for doing what was right, for trying to serve God, and I'm in a prison. Well, I met the head jailer of the prison, and he began to give me a few jobs to do, and I began to help out, and everything I did well, and God prospered it for me, and he noticed that, so he gave me more responsibility. And every time I took more responsibility, I did it well, and God prospered it for me, and soon I was the head of that prison. I was the one doing most of the jailer's work. I was second only to the jailer himself. I could move around freely in that jail. I took care of prisoners. I checked them in. I did all that I needed to do. I ran the prison. I thought, okay, God's in this. Okay, God's here. Things are going better than they were before. And then a couple of people were thrown into prison, the king's cupbearer, Pharaoh's cupbearer, and Pharaoh's baker. They were thrown into prison on the same day, and I met them, and I talked with them, and I chatted with them, and I noticed one morning they were downcast. And I wanted to be helpful, and I said, so what's going on, guys? What's the matter? Why are you downcast? I mean, obviously you were in a prison, I get that, but they were more downcast than usual, and they told me they had a dream. Each one of them had a dream. The cupbearer had a dream, and the baker had a dream. And I said, well, what were the dreams? And so the cupbearer told me his dream, and he said, I had this dream, there were 3 vines. 3 grapevines. And on these vines were these beautiful grapes that were growing. So I took those grapes and I squeezed those grapes and I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup. And I took that cup, which is full of these beautiful grapes and the juice of the grapes, and I took that to the king and he drank that. I said, He said he didn't know what it meant. I said, well, here's what it means. The 3 vines are 3 days. And in 3 days, you will once again be restored. The king will lift up your head and you will be restored to being the king's cupbearer. Well, that was exciting. That was a good interpretation of the dream. He thought that was excellent, and he went with that. He said, okay, I like that. The baker had a dream. I said, what's your dream? And the baker had a dream, and he had 3 baskets of bread on his head. And he was carrying these baskets of bread, and while he was carrying these baskets of bread, the birds were eating the bread. And he said, I don't know what it means. And I said, well, I know what it means. The 3 baskets of bread are 3 days. In 3 days, you will go before the king. And in 3 days, the king will lift up your head, literally, and you will be hung on a tree. Because the birds eating the bread is a sign that you are not going to be restored, but you are going to be killed. 3 days later came, and they were summoned before Pharaoh. And the cupbearer was restored to being the cupbearer of Pharaoh, and the baker was hung on a tree. I asked the cupbearer, I said, while he was in prison, I said, look, you're going to be released. You're going to be restored. So when you get restored to the Pharaoh, when you're restored to him and you're at his side, mention me. Tell him about me. Tell him my story. Tell him I was part of Potiphar's household. I was the most important person of Potiphar's household. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm here unjustly. Mention him to me so I get to go before Pharaoh. Well, he never did. He forgot. He didn't mention me. I figured that day, that maybe the next day, a week later, I would be before Pharaoh, and I waited a week and a month and 2 months and 3 months and a year. Never heard from him. Nothing. Now maybe he told him and he didn't do anything. I don't know, but he forgot about me. 2 years later, I was in that prison for 2 more years. Like, how does that make sense? God, here I thought was my way out. Here I thought this guy would tell Pharaoh about me and I'd be out of prison in a week's time. But 2 years went by. They were long, hard 2 years. They were years that I thought, why didn't this guy do anything for me? Why didn't this guy remember? Why didn't God remember me? What was God doing? What was God not doing? Where was God now? One day, 2 years later, the king had a dream. Pharaoh had a dream. In Pharaoh's dream, he dreamt that there were 7 fat, sleek, good cows. And those 7 cows were by the river and they were eating, and they were healthy cows. And then there were 7 thin, skinny, scrawny cows, bony cows. Not even worth eating type of cows. And these 7 scrawny cows, they ate the fat, sleek cows. And after they had eaten them, you couldn't even tell there was any difference in the scrawny ones. He had a second dream. The second dream was similar to the first dream. In the second dream, he had a dream of 7 full, ripe, bountiful heads of grain on one stalk. And these heads of grain were full, and they were marvelous, and they were healthy. And then there were 7 skinny, wind-scorched, sun-scorched, small heads of grain. There's barely anything there, hardly any food value there. And in his dream, these sun-scorched, skinny, thin, not worth much heads of grain ate the 7 good, healthy heads of grain. And you couldn't even tell there was a difference. And he had no idea what it meant. He summoned his wise men, he summoned his magicians, he summoned anybody who could kind of interpret this or come up with some sort of meaning, and nobody could. Nobody in his whole kingdom, not his most educated men, not his most, not the ones who were the greatest diviners, those who were supposed to be close to the gods. Nobody could understand what it meant. And it was then that the cupbearer remembered me. It was then that the cupbearer said, wait a second. When I was in jail, I remember this guy Joseph. We had a dream, and the baker had a dream, and both dreams he interpreted, and both dreams came true. You got to talk to this Joseph. So Pharaoh summoned me. I went and was released from prison. I got a bath. I cut my hair, cut my beard. I was presentable. I smelled good again. I went before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh told me his dreams. And he repeated the dreams about the 7 cows, the good ones and the skinny ones, and the 7 good heads of grain and the 7 bad ones. And he repeated all that, and he said, I don't know what it means. And I said, I don't know either. But God knows. God's the one who can interpret this. So I prayed. And I asked God, what is this? And God gave me the interpretation. And I said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh, this is what's going on. The 7 cows and the 7 good heads of grain, they're the same thing. They're 2 different dreams meaning the same thing. The 7 good cows, healthy cows, and the 7 full, healthy heads of grain are 7 years. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of bounty, 7 good years that the land will produce its crop, and Egypt will be rich and bountiful and plentiful for those 7 years. But the 7 skinny cows and the 7 sun-scorched grains, heads of grain, they represent 7 years of severe famine. And that 7 years of severe famine will follow the 7 good years. And after the 7 years of famine, you won't even know you had 7 good years. It will eat up the 7 good years, and it will be as if you never had those. I said, Pharaoh, you're going to have 7 good years, and you're going to have 7 years of famine. But I not only interpreted his dream, I took the opportunity to say, Pharaoh, this is what I would do. See, I knew a little bit of something about administration in Potiphar's household. I knew a bit about administration in the jail, being head of the jail there. So I said, this is what I would do. I would plan and prepare for those 7 hard years. Take 20%, 1/5 of everything that you get, all of your crops, all of your goods, and put them in barns. Put them in safekeeping for the time of need. And Pharaoh, this is the way I would do it. And I told him how I would get that done. And Pharaoh looked around and he said to everybody there, all of his magicians, all of his wise men, all of his people, all those who served him, all of his administrators, he said, does anybody else have a better plan than this guy? Is anybody else as wise as him? None of you here could tell me what the dream was. None of you had any clue, yet this man knows what the dream was. He just interpreted it, and he told me how we can get this done. Is anybody going to challenge him for being wiser? Of course nobody did, because nobody could. And the most amazing thing happened. Pharaoh told me that I would be in charge of administrating the grain, that I would be the one to make sure that 1/5 would be put away. And everything that I started doing went well. Every responsibility that Pharaoh gave me was done well, and God blessed it. And Pharaoh saw that God blessed it, and Pharaoh saw that I did well with it, and he gave me more responsibility and more responsibility. And soon I was in charge of the whole economy of Egypt. I was in charge of almost everything in Egypt. There was no one greater in Egypt except Pharaoh. I could see that God was in this. I could see that God was with me. I could see what was going on. It was amazing. We had 7 years of famine, or good years, and then the years of famine began. It was just like God had said. We had so much abundance of grain. I lost count. We couldn't even keep records for how much we had stored up. And soon the nations around us that were affected by the famine were coming to Egypt to get grain. We sold that grain. We traded their land for that grain. We traded their cattle for that grain. Egypt was the wealthiest place on earth because we had prepared, because God had told me what to do. I wondered to myself, what happened and became of my family? Because I knew they were in this famine. And I wondered how they were faring. I thought about them frequently. I mean, you would too. They're the ones who hated me. They're the ones who threw me in the cistern. They're the ones who wanted to kill me. They're the ones that caused the pain and the suffering and the hurt in my life. They were the ones who put me through things that I never should have been through. And one day they came. They came to buy grain. I recognized them, but they had no idea who I was. I mean, I had changed a whole lot since I was 17. I had a wife now. I had 2 kids now. I was completely different. I looked like an Egyptian. I dressed like an Egyptian. They had no idea that I would even be there. I mean, there was no concept in their mind that I would even be alive. But I knew who they were. And 10 of them were there. Now I had 11 brothers. I had a younger brother named Benjamin. Benjamin was my real brother. He was, both Benjamin and I were sons of Rachel. The only 2 sons that she had were myself and Benjamin, which is why we were the favorites, because Rachel was my dad's favorite wife. So now Benjamin was the favorite son. And I talked to these 10 of my brothers. I didn't let them know who I was, and I asked them where they were from. I asked them how their father was, if he was still living. I asked them if he had any more brothers, and they told me their father's still living and he is well. And they have a younger brother named Benjamin, and he is well. And I said, I began to actually, I was a little bit mean to them. I played with them a little bit. Because I accused them of being spies. I said, you're not really here for food, are you? You're not here for food. You're trying to spy on Egypt. You're trying to find our weaknesses. You 10 are spies. You're from another land in Canaan, and you're trying to see if you can take over Egypt and how we're doing in this famine and where our weaknesses are, aren't you? And they said, no, we're not. I said, well, how would I know? You got to prove to me that you're not spies. You got to prove to me that you're not here for bad intent. You got to prove to me that you are really here just for food. Because I know you guys. And you guys are evil. And you guys are wicked. And you are here for bad intent. And so I said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have to go home and you're going to have to bring your younger brother. You're going to have to bring Benjamin here. And they protested. Reuben and Simeon said, no, don't do this. You don't understand. They said, Benjamin is the youngest. Benjamin is the only son our father has left from his wife Rachel. He lost 1 son already, and Benjamin's the only one left. Don't make us bring him here. It'll kill our father if anything happens to Benjamin. And I said, he's got to come. He's got to come. If you want food, if you want to prove that you're not spies, then you got to come. He's got to come. I said, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to leave 1 guy here. 1 of your brothers will stay. The other 9 of you can go home, and I'll give you food, I'll give you grain, I'll give you everything you need, but you got to bring Benjamin back. If Benjamin doesn't come back, you don't get any more food. If Benjamin doesn't get back, you don't get your brother Simeon back. So they left Simeon, who was the second oldest. I guess I kind of wanted to see where they were at. Would they be so quick to betray another brother? Had they changed? Were they the same? Would they treat Simeon the way they treated me? Do they not care about their brothers, their family at all? So they left, and I did something else. I put their silver to pay that they brought to pay for their food, I put it back in their sacks, which you might not understand was a dangerous thing for them. Because if they were caught with the silver that they had brought, they would be immediately arrested. Because they would be thought to be thieves, stolen all the food. and they would end up in a jail worse than I was in. They got back home and they found the silver in their bags, and they had all the grain, and they told their father what I had said, and their father was unwilling for Benjamin to come. Eventually they convinced him that Benjamin should come. Reuben himself, Reuben, who wanted to save me, said, look, Dad, if anything happens to Benjamin, it's my fault. You can take it out on my family. You can take it out on my sons. I will be responsible for him. And so they came back, as I knew they would. It took them longer than I thought they would, but they came back. Still, I didn't tell them who I was. They brought gifts for me. They brought gifts of food, of cheese, of bread, of the produce of their land that they had been storing up. I told them that, had my servants tell them that we would dine together. I released Simeon from the jail. He washed up. He was okay. They brought back their silver, their original amount of silver that they paid for the food, and they brought a second amount of silver to pay for the next bit of food. They brought it all. They wanted me to know that they were honest people. They wanted me to know that they weren't thieves. And so we met for supper. And I arranged them in the order of their birth. That scared them, because they had no idea how anybody would know who the oldest was and who the youngest was. And we put food out on their plates, and we served them, and my servants gave Benjamin way more food than anybody else. Benjamin feasted on what he had. And they were shocked that Benjamin was feasting. They were scared, because they weren't sure what I was doing and why I would single out Benjamin and what that meant for them. They talked among themselves, and as they talked, I couldn't help my emotions. I could understand them, but they didn't understand me. They didn't know Egyptian, but I still knew Hebrew. And they talked about this being a penalty for what they did to their brother Joseph. And they talked about how they shouldn't have done that. And I knew that their hearts had changed. I had to go to the other room. And I wept. I wept because I saw what God was doing. I saw what God did. I saw what was happening. I saw something else. I realized when I was in front of my brothers, I realized that I was here because they were there. I realized that I was here because of what they did to me. I realized that I was in the position I was in because of the action they took. I realized that what they did to me ended up putting me here in the position I now had. I told them, I'll tell you what I told them. I said, what they meant for evil, what they meant to harm me with, what they meant to kill me with, what they meant to punish me with and get revenge on me with, God meant for my good. And not only my good, but the good of people everywhere. What they meant for evil, God meant for good. What they tried to do to destroy me, God used to develop me. They wanted to destroy me, God wanted to develop me. I realized in all of my questions of where is God now, I realized that God allowed this evil to come into my life. No, let me put it differently, because that's a bad way of putting it. That's not the right way of putting it. God didn't just allow evil to come into my life as if he was somehow passive with it. God arranged these things in my life because God is active in our life. God arranges our life. God arranged my life. God arranged for that cistern. God arranged for that caravan. God arranged for Potiphar. God arranged for that jail. God arranged for the baker and the cupbearer. God arranged for those dreams. God arranged for the famine. God arranged things in my life so that I am who I am today by God's grace. It wasn't by his neglect. It wasn't by his desire to see something bad happen to me. God arranged my life for good. For not only my good, but the good of those around me. What do you do when you don't understand God? You remain convinced. Through it all, no matter how hard it is, no matter how much you suffer, no matter what you need to go through, no matter if you can't see the end, no matter if you don't know how this is ever going to end, or if it's ever going to get better, you remain convinced that God is still God. And he arranges your life for you. God is still God, and he is arranging your life. He's arranging the events of your life for you. Because God loves you. And God wants what's good for you. I know it doesn't seem like it when we go through those hard times. It doesn't seem like it when we get those phone calls. It doesn't seem like it when we get those diagnoses. It doesn't seem like it when bad things happen. It doesn't seem like it when we just don't understand what is God doing and why isn't he doing. Where is God now? God is arranging your life for you because he loves you. What Satan means for evil, God will use for good. Because he's arranging it that way. Just a bit of encouragement. Trust him. Know that he's God. And know that he's God for you. He loves you. And he is for you. I close with these words. The Lord will bless you. And he is keeping you. The Lord is making his face shine upon you, and he is gracious to you. The Lord is turning his face towards you, and he wants to give you his peace. Receive from him. It might be a confusing message to believe that he wants to be gracious and turn his face towards you and give you peace and bless you. But remain convinced that he does. They're his words, and they're true. Receive a blessing from God. Receive peace from God. Receive grace from God today. He's for you. Trust him on that one. Thanks for joining with us this morning. May you indeed be blessed by God. Amen.